in the chat. Wade says, we're waiting on Dawn like waiting for the judge on Cybercam. On Cybercam? What? Like those Zoom court case things? Chiptree says no, he's early. I think I'm 1 minute late. Too Far says this emoji. Okay. 9F says Dawn's a weirdo. Maybe. Jay-Z says finally Dawn. Hello, Jay-Z. Gumbell says hello, Mr. Benitez. Hello, Gumbell. PE says gonna destroy biscuits and gravy and pretend it's you. Okay. Ricky Cornflakes says goat. Hello, Ricky Cornflakes. Spinner says hello, Miguel. Miguel. That's not my name. Jay-Z says I ate a Big Mac today, Don. You're unhealthy like me and many other people. Okay. Ricky Cornflake says, sup baby, I'm hitting the Stairmaster right now. I'ma have killer legs. Nice, I admire that. You're exercising. I don't do that. Aim says hi Benitez. Hello, Aim Benitez. Muntaha says hi Don. Hello, Muntaha. Jay-Z says, or should I say we? Don't say we. 9F says Don's not a weirdo. So you just change your mind from I'm a weirdo to not a weirdo? Okay. Ricky Cornflake says Don is amazing. Okay. Wade says Don is my counselor. Not true. Aim Benitez says I may. Aim, I may. I may. I may is how you pronounce your name. Hopefully I'll remember. I may. Mad Rush says hi Don. Wave emoji. It's about time. Hello, Mad. Paul says earliest I've caught a Don Benitez stream. Yeah, that I just started like 5 minutes ago. Maverick says, hey, when are you getting married? Not anytime soon. Thought says, all that gay shit got your algorithm off? Sorry. Gumbell says, me too, Paul, me too. You're telling someone in the chat named Paul, me too. Okay. Jay-Z says, Radiohead is a W band Too Far. You're telling Too Far that Radiohead's good? Okay. Don Hector says, who hurt you, man? I don't know. Foot says, Messi or Ronaldo? Messi. 9F says, I'm undecided. Undecided in if I'm weird or not? Okay. Dezenzi says, can you please shout out my homie racial slur? No. Drowsy says, when are you getting a haircut? Not soon, but I probably should like comb it and stuff and be more professional. Maria says, are you ever gonna have kids? Yeah. Open says, is it true you snitched on your best friend in high school? No. Mark says, thoughts on peeing in the pool? Don't do it. Not good. Unsanitary. Dancing says, you'd look sick with long hair? Maybe. Digital says, hi dear, I am a social media manager. I'm available to take up your responsibility for content strategy, creating and scheduling analytics. I don't care about analytics. Too Far says, I'm getting a haircut, Don. I think of you at some point during it, so I can be like, you're kind of getting a haircut. Are you saying that you want to get my haircut? The Truth says, incel. You're saying I'm an involuntary celibate. Okay. Wade says, you seem down. I'll come pick you up in my 2007 Honda Civic and we'll watch Eyes Wide Shut and eat unlimited Big Macs. I'm good, but you know me well. Jay-Z says, chat, I got my bangs fixed because I cut it myself. Message retracted. Okay. Kid says, is there no gray activity in your frontal lobe? I mean, when I stream, it's not, my brain isn't using like all of its facilities because all I do is read chat. Enya says, can you smile? Yeah, naturally. Wait. Joseph says, a great remote online part-time full-time job helping Temu merchants update data. I wouldn't want to work for Temu, that kind of scammy company. Alumni says, you anime enjoyers are disgusting. Anime enjoyers are disgusting. I mean, I've enjoyed Studio Ghibli movies. Uncle says, how you feel having the first openly gay president? Maybe he's gay, but I don't know about openly. Bazapi says, if Don doesn't want to get in that 2000 Honda Civic, I will. Feel free to take my place. Bryce says, can you grow facial hair? I can. I shave it every day. Nicole says, bubbles. Okay. Tony says, why we say tuna fish sandwich and not chicken bird sandwich? Because it's a tuna fish sandwich. Catherine says, tuna melt. You like tuna melts? Okay. Lost in the Room says, can you say baby gris? There you go. Alumni says, thank you for reading my rage bait to the chat to increase its reach. You said you don't like anime just to rage bait? Okay. Pooin says, you ever yo-yo your shits? Do I defecate? Yes. Justin says, does anything excite you? Sometimes there's interesting comments that excites me sometimes. Bill says, let's turn to God Shepherd's Chapel on YouTube. Explains the whole Bible. You're self-advertising? You've self-advertised a lot here. But if you're gonna self-advertise anything, I think it's good that it's like the Bible. Lucy says hi. Hello, Lucy. Enya says 6'7", bro. Laughing out loud. I didn't find that funny. Jay-Z says chat, message retracted. You wrote chat at the beginning of your message. Does that mean you don't want me to read it? It's just for, like, other people. Remember says, do you like spaghetti? I love it. No. Benjamin says hello. Hello, Benjamin. Catherine says just for us. It seems like it. Jay-Z says no. I accidentally said you instead of I. I mean, I probably could have figured it out, like what it meant. Dental says, do you think Trump blew Bubba? Blew Clinton? Maybe. Benjamin says hello. Hello, Benjamin. Arctic says, are you good under pressure? I think I work better under pressure. Ma says, you have what we call a flat effect. I'm monotone. Okay. Open Door says, diddy, 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 diddy. Okay. Flame Warrior says, this world will never satisfy you. Jesus can. Galatians 5:1. Okay. Wade says, how fast can you wrap a McDouble? No comment. Illuminati says, best anime? Spirited Away. Personally, but but I haven't watched that much anime, so there's got to be better stuff out there. D says, take more showers, vampire. I just did. Luscious says, bro, please give me $30 to buy cigs. Sorry, no. Kid Solar says, skull emoji. Okay. Bartholomew says, too much yogurt makes me queef. Okay. Custom says, how did your teeth so white? I mean, I think they're yellow. Felipe says, why you always wear the same shirt? I get attached to a look. Mr. LB says, when does the Scott Bayou child support money train run out of tracks? Scott Bayou is not my father, and you're saying like I resemble him? I don't know who he is. Tech Nexus says, hello, little guy. Hello, Tech. Max says, does every day feel like the same? You're stuck in a constant loop? I mean, my streams are the same thing every day, so I guess I understand why you'd say that. Yeah, every day seems kind of similar. Jay-Z says, I got my bangs fixed because I cut it myself, then I got it done properly. Yeah, that's nice to hear. Baby Luigi says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, Jesus. I've heard that before. Gumbell says, best TV show? Well, I've been liking Pluribus. CTG says, what do you think about the Epstein situation? I mean, I don't really care about world events too much, but I guess it is somewhat interesting, like the Trump and Clinton thing. Riley says, have you even hit a fan with your dick so hard? Never. Lily says, Don Benitez 430, are you depressed? No. Too Far says, why did God love this world so much? I bet there's cooler planets out there. Maybe. Maybe there's cooler planets. Dino says, this dude again, do you have a job? I'm not gonna say. Rob says, it makes me really sad every time I'm up late and I see you here. Why do you think that is? I mean, I feel like this is a drab atmosphere. Like I'm wearing gray, blank walls. There's no RGB lights or music. Open Door says he works at Taco Bell. Maybe. Ray says, you look slightly Jewish. Give me the gold around your neck. No. OG says hi. Hello, OG. CTG says, what do you think about the Talmud? Do you mean the Talmud? Talmud? No comment. Boss says, you got shrunk tiny toilet. What? Off Planet says yap, 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 yap. That's basically the stream. It's kind of you. Never mind. I Love Fishing says 8 or 2. 2. Kitty Cat says thank you for your smile. You're welcome. Mid Mama says when was the last time it clapped? I'm not gay if I'm interpreting your question right. Mr. LB Watson says, can I donate you $20 in Kohl's Cash and a 30% off coupon so you can get a spare pullover? Don't do that. I don't believe I'll follow through with that. CTG says, do you have a woman in your life? I'm gonna keep that private. Edgar says, the rhinoceros hypothesis was preposterous. Okay. SpaceX says, blink if you need help. I'm fine. Off Planet says idiot. I'm dumb. Okay. Max says, would you ever eat or do a mukbang on stream? No, I don't like it when people eat on camera. Thivik says, can you say King Steve? There you go. Donald says aliens. I'm not an alien if that's what you're saying. Cowboy Baby Yoda super chatted 10 American dollars. Thank you, Cowboy Baby Yoda. With, what is that? Like a turtle wearing a cowboy hat profile picture? Anyways, Cowboy says, Father Don, God bless on behalf on the Donites. You're, pretending like this is some kind of cult, the Donites. This isn't a cult, but the Donites does sound cool. Thank you again for your super chat. Femboy Stormtrooper says thoughts on the Nikado avocado situation. Is there a recent development? I'm surprised that I don't know about it. I will say that I thought when he became not overweight, the whole 3 steps ahead thing, that was cool. Paul says, Don acting like he doesn't like the fact that he's got a community. No, I like it. Open Door says, do you have Asperger's? Am I autistic? No. Riley says, thoughts on 3i Atlas? I don't care about it. I'm not worried about it. Daniel says, I dare anyone here to Google Zaid Garcia. I wouldn't do that. I imagine you typed some pornographic thing. Mad says, have you been lost in space? No. Catherine says, distracted emoji? Okay. Lala super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you, Lala. Lala says, hey. Hello, Lala. Thank you again for your super chat. Otis says, come on, dog, shit pee. You want me to defecate and urinate right now? No. Goatman says, thoughts on thoughts. I wish I didn't have as many as I did. Femboy says, the only thing I find interesting about 3i Atlas is that interstellar object is supposed to be a very rare occurrence, and we've had 3 in just a few decades. three-eye atlas is a very unusual occurrence. Okay. Cowboy says, Don, would you ever consider being cloned? No. Stranger Things says, have you been live since yesterday? Nope, that would mean I would have live streamed myself sleeping. I don't sink that low. Too Far says, can you ban two guys who said boo cause you can't sue him too much, true? What? Luscious says, are you a top or bottom? No comment. Mr. LB Watson says, which blood type tastes the best to you? O. Just kidding. I can't remember tasting blood. Nath super chatted €2. Thank you, Nath. Nath says, goth baddies or Latino baddies? Goth. Jero Ruiz super chatted $2. Thank you, Jero. Jero says, let me get an okay into the camera, laughing emoji. Okay. I mean, I say that all the time anyways, so. Byler says, it's me again, Pookie Dookie demon emoji. Hello, Byler. Vivek says, is my name that irritating? It's not irritating. El Guapo says, okay is his catchphrase. I guess it is. Cowboy Baby Yoda says, what's your favorite Resident Evil game, Don? I never got into those games, but maybe I'll play number 1 eventually. D says, lipstick queen. I'm certainly not one. I don't put on lipstick. Scumburger says, put the fries in the bag. Okay. Brian Abbott says, sup big dog, cocaine cowboy is in the house. Hello, Brian. Luscious says, goth femboys or goth girls? I mean, femboys is not my thing, so I guess goth girls. James says, Don, did you see Dan Hauser's interview? It was kind of interesting. I think you know that I already have, but you're still asking that for some reason. But yeah, I have seen it. Yeah, it was interesting to see behind the scenes, considering how secretive Rockstar is. River says, why didn't the monster eat the ghost? The ghost tasted like shit like ghost sheets. Okay. Will says, holidays, come on down and get your gay on. I'm not gay, so no thank you. Arctic says, we must feed the machine. What? The Seed says, how did you grow your channel? I've gotten most of my subscribers through live streams just like this. Ashcat says, hey Don, you're so handsome. Please never shave your eyebrows. Wasn't planning on it. Dale says, you look like you're having a stroke. I mean, Are people that have strokes this calm? I'm not too familiar, to be honest. Luscious says BBC or Femboy. Neither. If I have to choose, I'll cross that bridge if and when I get there. Byler says you don't remember me. I don't. Sorry. SS says keep breathing. Of course. Send it sideways says who hurt you. I don't know if I don't know. Chunky Sweat says Don Benitez facts. BBC is not his favorite. It's not. Catherine says, what if we stop chatting? I'll just be sitting here awkwardly with a lot of silence. The Ass Clown says half of your face would be paralyzed. That's a thing that happens in strokes. Okay. Randy says, bet Don doesn't have any pants on. I'm wearing jeans. Max says, how many cans of soda could you consume in one day? Could I consume? I don't know. 10. Marcus says, stick yo ding tip in a blender? No. Jonathan says, this chat is wild. It is, and I like it. Splax says 10 emoji, 10 emoji, 10 emoji. Okay. SP says, the legend has awakened from his eternal sleep to entertain the common folks. That's your perspective of me? Okay. Ball Striker says, hey guys, activate chat strike mode for 3 minutes. What is that? Rollick says, wow, I'm on mute. No, you're unmuted. Unknown says, nice lips. Okay. Byler says, bro, what the fuck? What about Alejandro Finger Booger the Third? What? Lost in a Room says, what's your perspective on meat? I enjoy it. Catherine says, have you blocked anyone yet? I have, but they're unblocked. Currently, there's 0 blocked people. Cold Slayer fan says, is your house cold? Yes. FNAF Kid says, say 6-7. I just did. There you go. Sorry about the lighting. 1 moment, please. Lori says, hey you, good to see you again. Hello, Lori. 9F says, why did you block them? I'm not gonna say. I'm scared says, supercalifragilistic. Okay. Tane says, you have your own emoji. Man with mustache emoji. How is that supposed to resemble me? Because he looks Mexican, or? Callie says, hello, Don. Hello, Callie. Solid Snake says, get a job, Jesus. Okay. Marcus says, you should read some Shakespeare, man. Yeah, I would like to. That's on my list. Rollick says, who the fuck eats raw meat with salad? People do that? Huh. Mad says, do you own a sombrero? No. RK says, you look like a mix of David Das Malakian and Edward Cullen. I think there's like Latino missing in there. Anthony says, can you fly? No. I mean, on a plane, yeah. Can says, y'all be nice to him. Do whatever you want. Lexi says, hello, how are you? I'm good, thank you. Volt says, can you give me the Zuck? No. I'm not gonna do my best to do that. No way. Daniel says, would you say you look like a distant cousin of Al Pacino? Yeah, maybe. Callie says, what did you do today? I mean, I ate a Big Mac. Chunky Sweat says, Chunky Sweat's fact. Don Benitez and I kissed when we met after I triangulated his location and he rubbed my solid snake. That's fake. PE says, can you give me my sum, Donald? Are you using Donald as a term for oral sex because you're inspired by the Zuck and the, like, Bubba thing? Okay. Catherine says, how much was that plastic burger? $8 around there. Goatman says, it seems like you keep looking at someone with you in the room. There's nobody else here. I'm just moving around because it helps me think. Ball Striker says, service announcement. Dawn will be leaving chat for a bathroom break in 3 minutes. That's not true. Mr. B says, are you inside of a cardboard box? No. But I can see how it would look that way because of the camera angle. I Love Food says, want to eat McDonald's with me? No. Riverwood says, it does look like he is. It looks like I'm in a cardboard box. Okay. Mad says, is this the real Don Benitez? Yes. Well, one of them. I'm sure there's other people with my same name. 9F says, what's the last thing you bought? The Big Mac. FNAF says, are you gay? No. Callie says, Don, to be or not to be? You're quoting Shakespeare? I forget the context though. We Dem says, have you ever been arrested? No. Lexi says, what did you do today? One thing I did was kill a fly with a fly swatter. Daniel says, that is the question. You're expanding on Shakespeare's quote. Okay. McLove says, L killer. Okay. 9F says, how do you clear your mind when trying to fall asleep? Just stay awake a long time so that when you get into bed, you don't think about anything else but sleeping. Banana Boy says, this guy sucks. You think this is lame? Okay. Brown says, don't worry, be happy. Okay. FNAF says, have you been to a Diddy party? No. Matt says, what's your favorite Simpsons episode? Maybe the one with Herman, the guy with one arm from season 1. Stops the Cap says, he's not a human. I am. The Ass Clown says, don't worry, be happy, like Bob Marley's song. Okay. Are you, like, commenting what you imagine how I would respond to... Never mind. Dolly says, Trump or Biden. No comment. Madback says the clanker. You're calling me a robot? Okay. Catherine says, are you AI fake vampire boy? No. Callie super chatted $2 American. Thank you, Callie. Callie says, good night, Dom. Forgot to charge my phone. I need rest. Bye. Bye, Callie. Thank you again for your super chat. Jero says, are you a Westworld? Is that also calling me a robot? Okay. Sully says, why are you being rude? I don't think I am. Anthony says, remember Teddy Rubskin? What? Sully says, the chat? Oh, you're asking the chat why they're being rude. Okay. Bree says, hello, Don. Happy emoji. Hello, Bree. River says, do you think a hot dog is a sandwich? No. Bobby says, what state are you from? I don't want to say. Sean says, Snorky Bear. Okay. James says, are there types of questions you'd like us to ask? Unique questions. 80 says, how did your penis reduction surgery go down? I haven't undergone that surgery. Wanakee says, what should we do about the Jews? No comment. River says, hot dog isn't a sandwich because out of the bun, it is still a hot dog. Huh, okay. Lexi says, do you have a girlfriend? I'm gonna keep that private. Brick says, bro, have you heard of the electric piano in Philippines that doesn't need to charge or need batteries? No. Max says, is okay your signature word? Yeah. Spinner says, do you have an internal monologue? I would say I do. Chris says, you're at it again tonight, Don. Comedy gold at its finest. I don't think this is comedy gold, but thank you. Rich says, hit or stand? Hit. McLove says, spicy, sweet, chili Doritos are fire. I don't think I've had those. Lady says, what's your favorite brand of pizza? Brand of pizza? I will say that my favorite toppings are pepperoni and pineapple. Evan says, water is wet. That's true. Anthony says, look into my mind. I can't do that. Big Kev says, Catherine XO goes hard in the paint. Okay. James says, laces or Velcro? Laces. Brad says, I hope you've had a good day so far. Thank you. Jero says, you put pineapple on pizza? Frustrated, suspicious emoji. Okay. Chunky Sweat says, at Lexi, are you looking to date our Latino Hispanic king? You're asking Lexi that? Okay. Anthony C says, put me down right now. Like a dog? Like, you want to be banned? I'm not going to do that. Zach says, why you seem angry? It's just my personality. Will Winters says, I found out today that my dad is actually my brother's sister. Does that mean your dad is your brother? Okay. Max says, do you get sleepy during the afternoon, dog? Yeah. Jero says, yee. Okay. Trey all day says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words are merely the smallest unit of language capable of containing meaning in isolation. I can't really comprehend that. The Ass Clown says, have you ever thought you were superior to a person? Unfortunately, yeah. Chunky Sweat says, Chunky Sweat's fact. Don Benitez and I oiled up our joints and joined the Latino Hispanic Clanker Festival. We've never done that. PE says, what race were they? The person that I felt superior to. Well, when that happened, it had nothing to do with race. It was nothing racist at all. Dolly says, shout out to the autists, those with autism. Okay. Rich says, I just lost all of my money, Don, because I made you hit. Sorry. John says, the Federation needs you. Join the Helldivers. I don't like video games. Chunky Sweat says, Lexi wants your hot data stream. You're using the word data stream as like slang for something sexual? Okay. Spooky Jishwa says, no comment. You're breaking the system. Okay. Ange says, are you gay? No. That guy says, bullshit, you don't like video games. I play them occasionally, but not that much. John Montez says, can you juggle? No. Lola says, you're cute. Okay. Gon says, how can you not like video games? Because it's fake. It's an illusion. Crab says, are you a juggalo? A prostitute? No. Bobby says, I see your bald spot. I have a bald spot? I don't think I do. Ryu says, what do you believe the reason for human consciousness is? I mean, I think that's unknowable. Madarush says, can you paint your room pink with sparkles? No, not my style. Michelle says, Jesus died for you, Don? Thank you, but I don't believe that. Crabgoo says, put black. You're giving gambling advice? Okay. Bobby says, can you make it clap? No comment. 9F says, why isn't your room gray? Because it came this way. I'm not interested in painting it. Skibbity says, yap, yap, yap. That's what I do. And Mad says, how's your night going again? Good. That guy says, Don, what do you want for Christmas? A microphone. Hog says, finish my sentence. Corn Pop was a bad dude. I don't remember the rest of what Biden said. Special Delivery says, brother, put on a hat. Why? I'm indoors. The Ass Clown says, do you find it funny that you like the color gray? Or your personality is a lot like that color? I don't know, I guess my personality likes that color. Catherine says, can you do pigtails? No, not my style. Hog says, Corn Pop was a bad dude. He ran a bunch of bad boys with pomade in the hair. Okay. Lola says, when I say you're cute, it doesn't mean I want to be in a relationship. You can't be nice these days. I see what you're saying. Null says, what range of the spectrum are you on? 0. Aiden says, cough if you're being held hostage. I'm not being held hostage. Sancho says, facts. Are you talking about, like, you can't be nice these days? Comment. Thought says, would you let Remy peg you for $1 million? No, I'm not into prostitution. Booga Suga says, you love Eyes Wide Shut. Have you watched Rosemary's Baby? Yeah, I have. And I understand why you asked that question, because Eyes Wide Shut is like Rosemary's Baby. Those are both also like House of Games. Hog says, why one eye red? Because I stare at screens too much. Paul says, thirsty odd chat today. Okay. Lexi says, blink twice if you're being held hostage. I'm not held hostage. The board says, was that a yawn? Nope. And Mad says, favorite constellation? Constellations? I forget the constellations. Johnny says, do you like Mr. Pibb? Who's that? Rick says, hey Don. Hello, Rick. Netball says, are you a scientist? No. James says, do you like Matt Walsh? That Daily Wire guy? No comment. Chunky Sweat says, Chunky Sweat's fact. Don Benitez and I are piping hot daddies. No, we're not. Catherine says, are you 5 foot? Well, I'm 5'7". Too Far says, favorite letter of the English alphabet? D. World Free Speech says, XRP crypto, salute emoji. Are you trying to get people to buy XRP? Okay. Fax says, are you Chinese? No. Daniel says, what is your IP address? Not gonna say. Ninja says, does this guy have a traumatic brain injury? I thankfully don't. Dill says, do you believe Islam is poisonous? Do I believe the Quran has poisonous stuff in it? I don't know. Cadence says, are you a person of high redeeming qualities? That's for someone else to answer, not myself. Sekiro says, I wonder how many people swiped after the 5-7 comment. Okay. The Revenation says, broomstick or mop handle? What? End Time says, 600 years after Jesus, Muhammad was alone in a cave. Then he was pressed hard by a fallen angel. Interesting. Too Far says, favorite Arabic numeral? Are numbers just Arabic numerals, like 5, 6, 7? Are those Arabic numerals? My favorite number is 12. Blank says, you look like you have flies on your parking brake. What does that mean? Too Far says yes. Okay. Arabic numerals are just numbers. Anthony C says, Mr. Pibb. What? Useless Square says, favorite emoji of mine is determined cat emoji. Okay. The Eraser says, I wonder how many dudes hearted the stream after that 5-7 comment when I said I was 5'7". Okay. Special Delivery says, can you name 2 characters from Breaking Bad? Don Hector and Jane. Meme Sloth says, can I have mods since I'm loyal? I don't give out mods anymore. Hendrick says, go work, you lazy dude. Okay. Too Far says, XRP is actually a pretty cool coin. I'm not into crypto. Gash says, who's going to win the World Cup? FaZe Clan. Just kidding, I don't know. Thought says, which one is the goon corner? There's no goon corner here. EJ says, I'm 6'7". Okay. Keith says, Yuma, Arizona, Yuma, Arizona. I have seen you, Keith, spamming Yuma, Arizona in other chats. Interesting. PE says, it's actually on the center of the screen. You see a goon corner. That's a goon corner. Okay. Keith says, I like my hometown. I get it. That's your hometown. That's why you spam it. Okay. Kohler says, okay. All right. Mint says, do you like Trump giving Kirk to Bill Clinton? What? Anthony C says, Screw world peace. I want a pony. How does that relate? Are you gonna rob someone of their pony? Or... SP says, did you remember Gumball? Said I would be back in December. That sounds familiar. 9F says, good night, Don. I have to go do a re-wipe. Okay. Bye. Vutis says, why don't you have the emoji bar available? Why did I disable like the emoji like thing? I don't like it. Keith says, did you see me spam on Kevin Yellow or Moonfei? I don't remember. I've been on both of their streams, so I don't remember which one. Jasmine says, does it ever get tiring reading all of these chats? No, it's really easy to do. It's not exhausting. Too Far says, he is anti-emoji because it sounds too similar to LGBT. No, I like LGBTQ. James says, any shootings in the last month in the local area? I don't want to think about that. SP says, did you know that the Philippines has 7,000 islands? I did not know that. Mr. California says, I don't like them. You don't like the LGBTQ? That's surprising considering your name is Mr. California. Also, I condemn your comment. Mr. LB Watson says, I like BLTs. That's about it. Me too. The Revenation says, as someone who lives where it's cold, I do my best to bring about global warming. Okay. Det says, Don Benitez, are you Filipino? No. Paul says, bros assuming all Californians got the same mindset. Yeah, I guess I was generalizing there. Rich says, I don't like them either. I condemn your comment. Dolly says, hit that like, show support, share, subscribe. Thank you, but you know, only if you want to. Too Far says, generalizing is a healthy habit. Sometimes pattern recognition can be wrong. Jasmine says, can you tell us your latest, greatest achievement? I mean, one of them I can say is I got monetized. So my greedy self can get money. Spooky says, is Elvis Presley your dad? I look like Elvis, kind of. Okay. Unlisted says, meow. Okay. Rich says, I was talking about the Californians, the gay ones. I think I understood that. James says, you're saving up to move to Tahiti, aren't you? No, not like Dutch. The Eraser says, when they said, I keep looking over at my goon corner beside my boyfriend, thanks for telling us. What? Oreo says, I just called a kid autistic. He actually had Down syndrome. No comment. Mufsa says, I condemn your comment. condemning his condemning comment. Okay. Nickel says, does your family have a nickname for you? No. Jay says, 1918 Ford Model TT. Okay. Bella says, accidentally swiped away. What did I miss? Nothing interesting. G6 says, these German hybrids are funny. What? Jason says, tired of seeing you pop up on my feed. If you click the 3 dots, you can click don't recommend channel. Kayla says hello. Hello, Kayla. SP says, is that a computer that you're reading the chats on? Yes. EJ says, Andrew Tate is Mangrew Taint. What? James says, down with Thatcher. Isn't Thatcher getting a rework soon? Vutis says, you're using way more teeth than usual. Thinking emoji. Okay. Ellie says, release the files. You want to see the Epstein files? Okay. Paul says, Don, what's the Thatcher rework? I don't know. I'm not too into Rainbow anymore. Catherine says, your mods look a bit depressed. Okay. Andrew says, what's your favorite Siege operator? Blitz. Also Clash. The Eraser says, bro's trying not to cry after that recommendation comment. What recommendation? The Rev Nation says, real men don't scratch their balls, real men pinch them. Huh, okay. Andrew says, oh my gay choice, but it's okay. I like playing them because it gets people angry. Sekiro says, Blitz and Clash, you're disgusting. Yeah, it's disgusting. Gaming says, pinch and roll. That's what you do to your testicles? Okay. Bradley says, what time is it for you? Nighttime. Painful says, have you played the reworked Clash? Yeah, but I think I prefer the older Clash. White Banana says, homie. Hello, White Banana. Medication says, do you know the Great White Hope is? No. Warzone says, hi, reading master. I'm a reading master. Okay. White Banana says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, 3. Okay. Anthony C says, unicorn emoji, wings emoji, wind emoji. You're making a farting Pegasus? Okay. Cone says, please tell my friend happy birthday. No. White Banana says, are you Spanish? Do I speak Spanish? No. Too Far says, he's typing his social security number sequentially. I doubt it. That would be very unsafe. Andrew says, thoughts on 6-7? I don't say the meme. Not a fan. Jack says, thoughts on 9/11? A national tragedy. Thought says, whoever tags me is getting blocked. You can't block people. Warzone says 6-7. Okay. EJ says men in black or men in back. Men in black. Jackie says, have you said it yet? This emoji. Well, I haven't done the gesture while saying 6-7. Stray says, Mary Billy Miss. Okay. Ben Franklin says, what's up, DB? Hello, BF. Lucky says, my name is gay porn. That's not your name. Gordon says, Trump 2028. Okay. Paul says, Don, I saw you holding that laugh back earlier. I might have, that might be true. Cheddar says, Buddy's eyes got fucked up. Did you get hit with a boat paddle? No, it's just, you know, too much blue light. Mr. LB says, you get to star in one of the following. Choose wisely. Young Norm, Munchichis on Ice, Zoolander the prequel. Young Norm. The Synth Wizard says, yo. Hello, Synth. Crawl says, bro looks like he got smacked with a 300 dick. Not true. Gordon Ramsay says, Jesus loves you. Thank you, but I don't believe him. Too Far says, Jesse loves you. Okay. Stray says, thoughts on Billie Eilish? Her music's good. Illuminati says, whoever moved first is gay. I guess I'm gay, according to that. Nehemiah says, best stream in their internet. I don't know about that. Crawlback says, bro, somebody busted a load in your eye. Ugh. No, it's just blue light. Molester says, you're so perfect. Okay, Molester. The Man says, death is inevitable. It is a concept that we cannot escape. That's true. Sick says, how many pronouns do you have? Sometimes I'm a cat. Sometimes you're a cat. Okay. Mind of Eli says, Imami. Okay. Dream Man says, Gordon Ramsay touched me. I think you're making a false claim. Canna says, what is 36 plus 31? 67. Cheddar says he was outstanding in his field. That's how the Scarecrow got his promotion. Okay. James says, you are clearly not a cat. That seems like something I would say. Mo says, have you ever been with an older man? No, let alone even a man. Catherine says, do you know a tarantula? Do I know what a tarantula is? Yeah, a hairy spider. Lucky says, do you have a girlfriend? No comment. Big says, bro, don't you have homework to do? Maybe. Eddie says, your bluntless hits the trolls like a spear through the heart. I'm not sure if it affects them that way. Jack says, do you live in a caravan? Maybe. Sev says, Don Benitez, I think I saw you at the gym. Maybe you did. Paul says, your antithesis is Truther777. Is that another streamer that's the opposite of me? Okay. Chunky Sweat says, he skipped me. Sorry. Painful says, what's your workout routine? I don't work out. Paul says, I just saw Jamal's Dequifa's YouTube Shorts edits of you. Yeah, I've seen them too. Apple says, do you know about searching for a world that never existed? No. Jack says, why are you always dressed like you work? It's just my style. Rick says, oh yeah, Truther is totally opposite you. Really? Maybe I should check him out. I'm curious. The Eraser says, whoever blew a load in your eye left some on the chair. Nobody has done that. I'm not gay. Nehemiah says, this guy doesn't believe in Minecraft. Notch is not God. Chunky Sweat says, Don Benitez fact. Chunky Sweats has been my blessing to Riz, the one huz in the chat. Are you saying you're my wingman? No, you're not. SP says, your girlfriend's name is no comment. That's not what I meant. Sri says, why do you look like you're done with life? Laughing my ass off. I mean, I'm not. It's just my personality, for good or for bad. Hog says, I love anal. Good for you. Mind says, if you had a bag of lettuce. What? Big says, he said his maids paid him to be his mods. Yeah. They don't actually ban people. It's just ornamental. And also, I can see them in the chat more easily. I read more of their comments. Nehemiah says, this guy is not in sex offender registry. That's true. Daniel says, how do we know you are not one of twins who alternate every 2 days? I guess you don't know. Too Far says, do you prefer to eat apples off the core or by the slice? I mean, I like the slices, but I usually eat it off the core because it's faster that way. I don't have to cut it. Hunter says, Truther777 is one of those brain rot live streamers, just talks nonsense. I mean, a lot of nonsense comes out of my mouth because maybe we're similar, kind of. Blondie says, hi, where are you from? The United States. Fram says, do you like your privacy being invaded? I don't mind it. I just don't want to get swatted. Srivik says, dicks in my ass. That's happening to you right now? Okay. HB says, hey, just passing through, you have a really nice voice. Thank you. Nehemiah says, I like eating Camelback hydration pouches. That can't be healthy. Cheddar says, sometimes I go to Walmart on senior day and take a huge dump in the freezer and blame the old ladies. That's pretty messed up. Anonymous says, have you ever been swatted before? No comment. Max says, do you think Mr. Beast is evil? I mean, everyone is. Maverick says, if life education is the ideal academic system, why isn't it being applied? It takes too much effort. Jacqueline says, hi Don, wave emoji. Hello, Jacqueline. EJ says, you have a future as a PBS radio host? I hope not. Zed says, what's the gayest thing you've ever done? I mean, I have seen gay pornography because, like, I get sent it as a troll through my messages, but I guess that's involuntary, so it's not really something I did. Rick says, I think you're a very interesting person. Thank you. Wade says, could North Korea wipe us out? No. JP says, sending you more. Please don't do that. Too Far says, if everyone is equal and everyone is evil, is everyone equally evil? Interesting. I don't know. Anonymous says, Patrick Cook, sorry about your dad. I hope he recovers from cancer. I hope he recovers. The man with two hands says, we could grow a house, we could build a tree. Isn't that a Nirvana lyric? James says, gotta be careful, Don. People could send you some really bad stuff. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Hey, it's Ava says, Don, the lighting looks different today. Yeah, it's been different the past few streams. Paul says, cool, I have a dragon tattoo. Okay. McLove says, have you had your Obama O's today? Is that like a cereal? No. That E says, I'm sending Dawn all of my used condoms. I don't want that. Fresh Garbage says, how old are you? Not gonna say. Jay Moulter says, found you in my feed again. Hello, Jay Moulter. Mind of Eli says, what's your opinion on Charlie Kirk? Well, I wish he hadn't had been murdered. Abram says oil up. No. Fred says he's 6, 7 years old. Okay. Jay Fresh says, do you have dreams about reading your chat? Not yet. Too Far says high five. This emoji. You made me perform that emoji so that you could high five me. Okay. Stray says, birds of a feather, we should stick together. Billy lyric. Lil says, do you make any money off this? Yes. Hog says, my crotch burns. Sorry to hear that. Srivik says, there are 4 crows sitting on a fence. How many legs do they have? Well, crows have 2 legs each, so I guess 8. But I imagine there's a catch. Riley says, the Time Safari Inc. guide warns hunters against altering the past. Okay. Wade says, Don works at a bank in California. Maybe. The man says, sorry for the delay in response. I have been working on my computer for a year. What? Greg says, Kermit really likes sweet and sour pork. Okay. Mind of Eli says, Corty, you up? Okay. Braden says, what level town hall are you? I don't remember. It's been like a decade since I played. SP says, the time war races towards its dramatic conclusion, resting in the hands of Ben 10. I haven't watched Ben 10. Hey, it's Ava says, Dawn, I can't sleep. Sing me a lullaby. No. Check, 1, 2, 3, check. Check, 1, 2, 3. Do you see me? Check. Do you see me? Check, 1, 2, 3, check. Do you see me? Do I need to restart the stream? Do you see me now? Say you see me, just don't say yes. Okay, you guys see me now. Great, I'm glad it fixed itself. I almost just restarted the stream. Jacqueline says, we see you, laughing emoji. All right, great. Yer says, Dawn, do you think I'm handsome? I'm looking at your profile picture and it's a picture of me. So, sure. Paige says, hello, Jesus loves you. I don't believe in Jesus, but thank you. Fool says, what do your friends from high school think of you now? I mean, I don't know most of them, so I couldn't tell you. Too Far says, you crashed reading my comment, Dawn. I was really looking forward to learning what a decade was. It's not like a deck like a ship and aid like helping. It's decade like 10 years. J Money says unamused emoji. Okay. Max says, how do you type so fast on keyboard? Practice being chronically online. Tabitha says, cut or uncut. Am I circumcised? I'm gonna keep that private. Filthy says, play song in the background. It would be like more entertaining if there was music in the background, but I don't know. I don't think it fits the style of the stream. Al says, have you ever worn a full beard? No. Riley says, do you like my profile picture? Sure. It's myself. Angela says, what's the point of this live? I mean, like most content on the internet, there's no meaningful purpose. It's just slop entertainment. Too Far says, Riley, what the fuck? You look familiar? Yep, it's me. Ur says, Dawn is my daddy. That's not true. Chunky Sweat says, at Bella, we are all a little off in age, sadly. What? Fresh Garbage says, Dawn is God. No, I'm not. Almander says, I think a full beard would look handsome on you. Try it. Maybe. VW says, Dawn is my son. You are not my mother. Satyam says, are you going to watch Raw on Netflix tonight? I don't know what Raw is. Crazy says, chill stream. Thank you. Too Far says, so many familiar faces in this chat. Yeah, there's lots of people with profile pictures of me. Maximus says, what are your pronouns? You already know them. Fresh says, I won't put up with this. Okay. Curly says, you remind me when I met my ex-parents. Okay. Lanny says, hi there. Hello, Lanny. Riley says, yes, you will. It's my daddy. He's mine. What? 05 says, can he sing Fiend? I'm not gonna sing Fiend. Roblox says, 123 is watching. Okay. Paul says, Don, should I get In-N-Out or would you advise otherwise? In-N-Out sounds good. James Flint says, what happened? It randomly started lagging. Now it's better. Too Far says, keep spamming. Don't listen to that fruit. Okay. Sekiro says, I want some McDonald's fries. Okay. Strawberry Edit says, bruh. Okay. Ur says, Dawn, I can't see you again. Streamed crash again? I think you're trying to trick me. Strawberry says, what's wrong with being a fruit? Strawberry Edits is asking, what's wrong with being a fruit? Funny. I apologize for the zooming in. Sorry. Riley says, Dawn is God. No. Oscar says, please sing Fiend by Travis Scott featuring Playboy Cardi. No. MS says, I love the zoom in. Okay. Riley says, Dawn is my Lord and Solomon. No, I'm not. Anarchist says, laughing out loud, zoom in more, so random. It wasn't on purpose. Shadow says, if you could choose to be immortal and live forever, would you? No. Paul says, Do you still place that card in front of your phone? I used something else. Fresh Garbage says, I pray to the altar of dawn. Don't do that. MS says, I should do more weird stuff. Me? No, I like keeping things simple. James says, do you have any pets? Yes. Diana says, do you enjoy answering questions? Yeah. Sad Guy says, the funniest thing about you is when you say okay after every sentence. You think that's funny? Okay. The Eddie says, Foo, Manda, cheese. I wonder what the hell I just said. Thorn says, I'm doing number 2 right now. You. Yee says, I blacked out with you 4 weeks ago. Don't you remember? I don't remember. Riley says, sacrifice your newborn for Dawn. Don't do that. Max says, are you an F-boy or an uwu boy? Am I a femboy or an uwu boy? Neither. Gangster says, I'm pooping. Okay. Someone says, dye your hair purple. That's not my style. Roblox says, do you remember me from previous streams? I do not. Satyam says, bro, I highly recommend you must watch WWE Raw tonight. You'll be a fan of WWE. No, so thank you though for the recommendation. Oscar says, what is your favorite soccer player team? I'm not into soccer. Multi-subconscious says, is it time for me to take a shower? Yes. James Flint says, highly doubtful. With triple, he's creative. What? Hesper says, favorite video game? Red Dead Redemption 1. Paul says, Dawn, getting tired, I can feel it. Maybe. Hog says, I drop in daily to hit the like and tell you about Corn Pop. Thank you. Multi-subconscious says, okay, I'll go take a shower now. Goodbye. Bye, Multi. VW says psychopath or sociopath. I prefer sociopaths. Hesper says, ooh, good choice. What about Red Dead Redemption 2? I didn't really like that one. Unlisted says, do you hydrate? Not enough. I should. Right now. SP says, would you rather get blown to oblivion or blown by a billion? No comment. Oscar says, I haven't showered since 2019. Are you evolving? Is your body, like, changing? Thought says, what do you call a Mexican who lost his car? I lost the message. Sorry. Message deleted by too far? Why did he delete the message too far? I might have to... Too far. As you know, you're not supposed to actually moderate. You're just an ornamental mod. Now you're not mod at all. That was... This is a sad moment. The Faded One says he was spamming. He was, but I'm the only one here that deletes or bans messages, as I said before. Diana says, would you rather be blind or deaf? Deaf. Riley says that was too far. Yeah, that's true. Dax says, on everyone's soul, I love Dawn. Thank you. Aria says, do you value existing? Yes. The Faded One says, too far, he did say to never actually moderate. That's true. James Flint says, what's the deal with Dax Shepard? Who's that? Amanda says, I'm having another asthma attack. Where is my inhaler now? I don't know. Sorry. Rick says, if it burns when you pee, use a condom. Okay. Luis Alvarez super chatted 20 pesos. Thank you, Luis Alvarez. Luis Alvarez says, day 8 of asking Dawn to play Minecraft with me. I admire your persistence, but no Minecraft today. Thank you again for your super chat. Deacon says, have you seen the clown that hides from gay streamers? No, all I can think of is Gypsy Crusader, but I think you've said that wasn't him. Rick says the P comment was for the spammer. I see. Keith says, man shall not lay with another man. Okay. Chunky Sweat says, forgive me for asking again, Father Don. I hope I'm not taking it too far, but Bella is asking to get your blessing for our clankership. I don't do blessings. The Rev Nation says, knowing is half the battle, G.I. Joe. That's a quote. Okay. Crazy says, I just got stabbed by a clown. Sorry to hear that. Roblox says, rip too far. Yeah, rest in peace, too far. Anonymous says, In-N-Out or Shake Shack. In-N-Out. Bella says, no blessing. No blessing. Chunky Sweat says, my sadness. Are you sad about too far? Chang says, I need to do my homework, but I'm watching YouTube. Do your homework. MS says, what fragrance do you use? I don't know, I just use some random one. Frush says, day of churning in the local Wendy's. What? Too Far says, Too Far super chats $2 American. Thank you, Too Far. Too Far says, F Don Benitez, see you never. You're leaving like shape-shifting. Today's a sad stream. But thank you for the super chat, Too Far, and I hope you don't leave forever. Jacqueline says, the watch is out. It is. Captain says, I'm back. Hello, Captain. SP says, Don Benitez versus Mr. Beast will be the best gladiator match in the history of the world. I don't think that's happening. Anarchist says, the drama is nuts in this shiznit. It's not that intense. Max says, night owl or early bird. Early bird. Joan says, kangaroo emoji. Okay. Lincoln says, is your last name Benitez? Maybe. Amanda says, Riley, why is your profile picture Dawn's face laughing my ass off? Yeah, I did notice that. That's goofy. Keith says, it encourages people to be strong and courageous in difficult times. Joshua 1:9. Okay. D says, where is all the fucked up comments? Just wait. Luis Alvarez says, I got the bartending on weekends job. It's been going great. Do you remember? I do remember that. You told me that in a super chat. You spontaneously got the job after walking in. Max says, how do you keep your hair so soft and poofy? I don't know. That's the way it is. James Flint says, plantation owner in the late 19th century or German officer on 1942. I mean, for most of the late 19th century, slavery was illegal, so I guess that. I don't want to own slaves, though. Five Diamond says, dude, saw Predator tonight, and I highly recommend it. Thank you. Joseph super chatted 2 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph says, hello again, Donahue. Hello, Joseph. Fresh Garbage super chatted 2 American dollars. Fresh Garbage says, you are my god, I'm gooey. I don't view me as your god, I'm not your god. I see your profile picture. It's me, my face. Anyways, thank you again for your super chat. Jamal DeQuifa says, hello, my Hispanic Latino king. Hello, Jamal. Chunky Sweats super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you, Chunky. Chunky says, rip to my boy, Too Far, and Bella. And now Bella is my boo now? Okay. Too Far is dead, and now Bella is your friend. Okay, thank you again for your super chat. MS super chatted 2 Australian dollars. Thank you. Lots of super chats now for whatever reason. MS says, do you like sports or not? If so, what sports? I'm not too into sports, but if I had to choose one, basketball. Thank you again, MS. What the? More super chats? Luis Alvarez super chatted 20 pesos. Thank you, Luis. Luis says, good night, Father Don. I have work tomorrow. Good stream. See you later, Luis Alvarez. I look forward to you saying, day 10 of asking Don Benitez to play Minecraft. Bye. Thank you. Lil Pierogi super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you. Lil Pierogi says, keep up the grind, bro. From Lil Pierogi. Thank you again, Lil Pierogi. Ugh. Fresh Garbage super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you, Fresh Garbage. I really appreciate it. Fresh Garbage says, we will always believe in the Almighty Don. I'm not divine, so don't do that, but thank you for your super chats and you being here. Thanks. Sir Jacob says, I appreciate you, Don. Juice box emoji. Thank you, Sir Jacob. Open Door says, hail, Don. Don't do that. Amanda says, that doesn't mean we can't believe in you, bro. Don't. I'm not someone worth believing in. Paul says, Don never fails to smile whenever money enters those pockets. Maybe. Riley says, I mean God. I'm not God. Fresh Garbage super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you again. Fresh Garbage says, you are our chosen one. Now we follow, you lead. I only lead this stream. Don't take me seriously or take my advice seriously. I'm not a divine person or a wise person. Thank you. Ashcat says, Don, you're so handsome. Please never shave your head. I won't do that. Joseph super chatted 5 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph says, day 1 of getting Don to streak. Here's how it's going. Don. Streak, like get naked. I'm not gonna do that. That's degrading. I'm not gonna. But anyways, though, thank you, Joseph, for your super chat. I really appreciate it. I'm not gonna go naked though. Dreddy says nice teeth. Thank you. Luis Alvarez super chatted 20 pesos. Thank you. Luis says, correction, it would be day 9. Don't disrespect me. Okay, sorry for getting the days mixed up. Thank you for your super chat, Luis Alvarez. I appreciate it. The cool dude says, it's my birthday today. Okay. Fresh Garbage super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you. Fresh Garbage says, I take our God very seriously. You, our God. Seriously, you, our God. I'm not your God. Don't think that, but thank you so much for your super chats, Fresh Garbage. I appreciate it. The Next Gen Boy says, I'm almost finished on. Keep looking at the camera. I mean, I always look at the camera, so you're in luck. Brad says, did you just wake up? You look terrible. No, I did not just wake up. Joseph super chatted 2 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate it. Joseph says, day 2 type of guy. See ya then. See ya, Joseph. I'm never gonna streak. Never gonna go naked on stream. But thank you for your super chat, though. I'm just letting you know you're asking in futility. Sakuro says, ISTG, this is my 13th reason. Why is this stream bad for you? Poster says, yo Don, today was my B-day. I hope you had a good day on my B-day. Yeah, today was good. Today was a good normal day. Thank you. Open Door says, our God Don loves super chats. It makes our God smile. Yeah, I like money. Chunky Sweats super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you, Chunky Sweats. Chunky Sweats says, Don is our favorite Latino Hispanic clanker daddy. I have never been called that all at once. Latino Hispanic clanker daddy. I don't like that title, but you're using it in like a way to admire me, which I appreciate it. Thank you, but thank you for your super chat. I appreciate it. Appalachia says, my father is in hospice for abdominal cancer. It's been rough. Any advice? I mean, what cheers me up is spending time with people, not being alone. Adam says, I'm a subscribe to you. Okay. Jack says, my sister is pregnant. I'm going to be dad. You're going to be a dad? Okay, I don't condone the incest with your sister. Cookie says, hi Don, remember me? Yes. Fresh Garbage says, super chatted 2 American dollars. Thank you. Fresh Garbage says, we must surround Almighty Don with treasures now. Yeah, I would like that, but who knows if I deserve it or if it's a wise decision. Thank you, Fresh Garbage, for your super chat. I really appreciate the treasures. Skinny says Donica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky. Donica Lewinsky. Okay. Riley says take my keys. No. Emily says, girl, I saw that TikTok. Ain't nobody kidnapping you. What? Amanda says, Jack, you made me pee myself laughing my ass off. Jack said something funny. Okay. Joseph super chatted 5 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Joseph. I really appreciate it. Joseph says, fresh garbage. Where did you get that profile picture? I want one. You know where. Thank you again, Joseph, for your super chat. Madback says, couldn't sleep and I've cycled the doom scrolling. You've been doom scrolling a lot and you can't sleep still? Sorry to hear. Sekiro says, I'm witnessing a YouTube stream chat love story. I don't know if this is a love story. It might be like I think it's something more akin to like a religion or a cult or something because of these super chats I've been getting. Fresh Garbage says, Don. Hello. Gay Sean says, write my name on your wall. I'm not that kind of streamer. Quentin says, what made you want to start streaming? It just looks entertaining, and also, I guess, money. Also, I've always wanted to be a YouTuber growing up. I was brainwashed into thinking that way because I grew up with the internet. David says, say uwu. There you go. Brittany says, do you know Jesus? I don't believe in Jesus. NS says, do you like a burger? Yeah. Crunchy says, is it bubblegum pink or roast beef brown? No comment. Tony says, what's your IQ? I've never taken a test. Joseph super chatted 2 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph says, money, huh? Yeah, I like money. I wish I didn't like it as much as I do, but it's the case. Thank you again, Joseph, for your New Zealand dollars. Crow says, steak or chicken? Chicken. Brittany says, I hope you do seek him. You'll never regret it. I appreciate you trying to evangelize me. James says, literally profiting off all of us idiots with minimal effort. I understand that viewpoint, but it's not black and white like that. Madback says, bro, looks like he want to spit back the New Zealand dollar back. No. Max says, do you believe that to be cringe is to be freed on? That sounds right. Joseph super chatted 5 New Zealand dollars. Joseph says, take it. I just won't feed my kids. That's not a good trade, Joseph. You should keep your money then. But even though you said that, I appreciate the money. The New Zealand dollars. Riley says, I believe in multiple gods. What is that called? Polytheism? Okay. Jacqueline says, OMG laughing emoji because he can't feed his kids. Okay. Brittany says, do you consider yourself to be a serious man? Somewhat. James says, I respect it, but I do think there's more accurate than inaccurate. That's more accurate than inaccurate. but no hate here. Maybe. Maybe. Bella says, why am I God? Laughing out loud. You're not God. Trance says, hey mate. Hello, Trance. Bacon says, do you ever get silly perhaps sometimes? Silly? I mean, do I commit tomfoolery? I do grief in video games sometimes. Rick says, at least Dawn is not begging by saying hit like and subscribe. Yeah, that's intentional. I don't want to be desperate. Braden says, can I come over and play? No. Open Door says, all hail Dawn. Don't hail me. Max says, would you ever get piercings in the future, Dawn? No, maybe, but right now it's not my style at all. The Blur says, God loves you. Thank you, but I don't believe in him. Lego says hi. Hello, Lego. Fresh Garbage says, Dawn is God. No, I'm not. Alexis says hi. Hello, Alexis. Archer says, Father Dawn, hand emoji. Hello, Archer. Money says, Dawn, ruler of mankind, weather changes when he changes moods. That's not the case, but that'd be cool. Brittany says, I was born again last month. Making jokes about Jesus will only hurt yourself, chat. You became a follower of Jesus last month. That's quite something. Thank you again, but I'm just not a believer. MS super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you. MS says, do you swear a lot or very little? Very, very, very little. Yeah, I really don't swear. I really only swear when I'm reading other people's chats. Thank you again, MS. Farah says, hi Dawn, do you celebrate any kind of holiday like Christmas or Easter? I do. Yeah, like somewhat. Deed says, does the curtains match the drapes? No comment. Archer says, nobody in our everyday lives will understand our devotion and love for Father Dawn. Okay. Joseph says, Dawn swears it at chat a lot. No, I don't. Bree says, hi. Hello, Bree. D says, show us your vampire teeth. No. Robert says, do you think humans were brought here from another planet and they were interbred with other species? Not really. Grady says, watch out for this streamer. People's very arrogant. Are you saying I'm arrogant? Okay. D says, who blew bubbles? Do you mean Bubba? Bacon says, would you fight a raging chimp for $60,000? Fistcuffs only? No. True Crime says, how about me? Hi, Dawn. Hello, True Crime. Fresh Garbage says, Dawn so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son so that whoever believes in him will not die but have eternal life. Dawn 3:16. That's... You made that up. That's not a real... You, copycatted the Bible. That's fake. Open Door says, amen, Dawn. Okay. Secura says, is it normal for the back of my head to get numb with blood? I don't think so. Well, I don't know. Bella says, I'm Asian and Latina. Okay. Michelle Taylor super chatted $1 Australian. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. Archer says, the Dawn lore runs deep. Yeah. Michelle says, hello, how are you doing? Good, thank you. Today has been a good, normal, awesome stream. Robert says, hello from North Korea. Hello, Robert. Rick says, another thing, Don doesn't make fun of God or say he is imaginary. I appreciate it, although he doesn't believe. Yeah, I'm not a believer, but you know, I appreciate the Bible and people that try to evangelize me. I appreciate them. Lego Titanic says, why do people believe in God and that shit when there's no proof? I don't know. I'm not the person to ask. Madback says, Dawn's Proverbs have touched me. Books 2 Dawn through 6 Dawn. That's fake. Secure says, Dawn, do you like Chinese food? Not really. All I like is orange chicken and rice. Tay says, your demeanor is like the YouTuber Loaf. Oh yeah, I know that guy. Loser, fucking everything. Yeah, I know him. James Flint says, there's a lady who live streams about God a few hours before you, and honestly, she's too obsessed with God to find time to live. I mean, if God is real, wouldn't you want to be obsessed with him? Landscaping says, God bless you and your family. Thank you. TJ says, why is Loaf a loser? Loaf stands for loser of fucking everything. Lego says, have you ever been to New Zealand? If so, why? I haven't been. The only thing I know about it is that there's kiwis there. The bird. Joseph super chatted $2 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph says, P.O. Box? Could be fun. Heart emoji. That could be cool. I don't know. I feel like most of the stuff I would get, it'd be cool to unbox it and see it, but I feel like most of the stuff would just end up going in my closet and I would never use it again, you know? So thank you again for your super chat. Gina says hi. Hello, Gina. Brian says, sup, cocaine cowboy is back. Hello, Brian. Chronic says, do you have a day job? I keep that private. Brittany says, don't overthink too often, Don. Thank you. Robert says, I've got work to do and can't if you're streaming. You can't work if I'm streaming? Okay, I'll end the stream then.